Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 133. And today we're going to talk about how easy, or maybe not easy, it is to manage this global health crisis if you are a person with different cultural roots who professionally lives in different parts of the world simultaneously. Yes, he can do that. You'll see that in a second. How you manage a pandemic with that kind of background, and what implications may that have for the rest of us. Stay tuned. Living in different parts of the world at the same time. Did I really say this? Man, I can talk some stupid nonsense. Let's face it, our guest today gets close to that. And I'm not going to butcher an introduction here because he's kind of TED Talk famous for some of us in our field. You may have actually seen him on your computer screen or on your little screen or wherever before. Our guest today, welcome in the Two Chaps Many Cultures studio complex, is no less than Pellegrino Riccardi. Buonasera, 𝙏𝙬𝙤, and good evening. See, I tried.
Fantastic, well done. Buonasera, 𝙏𝙬𝙤, and good evening. Yes. How are you? Hey, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right here in Norway. Here in snowy, wintry Norway.
Snowy, wintry Norway? Well, I don't want to compete with you.
No. Winters, I used to love them. Getting tougher every year.
Now, those of you who don't know you yet probably should know that you're not Norwegian, even though your first and last name may sound Norwegian to some. However, your cultural background is what exactly?
So the family, parents, mother and father, they come from Italy, the south of Italy, around the Napoli area, a village on the other side of the Vesuvius volcano, if you're looking out from Napoli city. They moved to the UK in 1960, so I was raised in the lovely city of Bath in the southwest of England, beautiful city. And then around the age of 30, I moved to Norway to be with a Norwegian woman. And now I have 3 blonde Norwegian children.
So what language you speak at home? Italian, English, Norwegian, all 3 of them at the same time?
That's a really good question. Actually, I speak English to everybody consistently. And a lot of people say, why don't you speak Italian to them? Because my parents didn't speak Italian. They spoke a Napoli dialect. There are many dialects in Italy. I believe there are 21 dialects in Italy. And then they have this one unifying official language. And the Napoli dialect is not the most useful dialect to speak in the world. So I thought I'm going to just do the English thing with them. So I speak English to them and they answer either in English or Norwegian, depending on their mood, how angry they are with me. How much they like me.
Well, which implies that they are angry at you once in a while. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell how tired my wife is by the language she speaks. Very simple.
Yeah. I think I can relate to that. I'm married to a Polish girl. I think I can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, when things get serious. Yeah.
I'm curious quickly about the Italian dialects. I mean, we've had this on this program before, especially when Antimo Cimino joined us, and we've talked about the regionalities and that how national culture is such a arbitrary concept that without recognizing the nuances in the region, we will never truly understand a culture. So the dialect spoken in and around Napoli is well, you said not the most helpful around the world.
Well, it's obviously helpful around the area of Napoli. Of course it is. It's, but it's not, I wouldn't call it an international language. Right. Apart from the fact there are lots of Napolitani all over the world. There are more Neapolitans outside Naples than in Naples, perhaps. But for example, there's a series on there, Sky TV called 𝙾𝙗𝙀, which talks about the Gomorrah. It's a brilliant series. And all the gangsters in it, they speak Neapolitan, right? And they have to subtitle for the Italians. But I understand every single word they say. You know, it's my father's language, basically.
Right.
And it really is a different language. But perhaps people in Rome, which is about 200 kilometers away, they'll understand most of it. But people from the north in Milan won't get it at all. And vice versa. When they speak Milanese in Milan, I won't understand it either.
Right.
And Napolitano doesn't sound Italian either. It sounds, because it is a mixture of, well, it's his history, isn't it? It's got Arabic in it. Mm-hmm. It's got, it's got Catalan in it. Obviously, it's got Italian in it as well. Words of Spanish, and it's very guttural. It kind of comes from the throat. I wouldn't call it a very pretty language. It doesn't sound like the buonasera la 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 that everybody thinks Italian is. It's much more guttural and a lot of Arabic, as I say. So that's why I don't go for that language there. Give them English, which is, after all, the most widely spoken language in the world, right? So, yeah.
Well, so just for me to close my loop, as I'm not a linguist, but I'm trying to get behind the logic of it. So the official Italian language, is that more northern? Is that Tuscany?
Well, officially it started in Tuscany with old Alighieri Dante, of course. He started it, but it's a kind of a central northern sounding Italian, yes.
Okay. And with the unification of Italy, with Garibaldi and others, it became the standardized language.
Standardized language, and everybody speaks it now. And actually, the dialects are slowly they're not dying out, but they're not, the kids today, they probably speak English better than their actual dialects that their grandparents spoke, right? So I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. We're supposed to be a unified nation. It's not very unified if you've got 21 different languages, right? So
now, growing up in Bath, you speak a unique type of English as well compared to other parts of the...
Well, yeah, I guess it's a Southern English, but people who live in the UK will recognise a certain southwestern twang in my accent. But it's basically Southern English, yes. Okay. It can be quite posh when I want it to.
All right, that's what I'm trying to hint at.
And if I need to complain to the Norwegian authorities, the tax authorities, I only do it in English, actually. And I only speak to Scandinavian Airlines in English. It's actually difficult to pretend I don't understand their Norwegian, just simply because you get better service.
How does that explain?
Well, it kind of creates this image, doesn't it? First of all, the Scandos, and especially the Norwegians, love the Brits. And I know not everybody loves the Brits, but the Scandos definitely do. And it kind of creates this perception of someone who's educated and honest and reliable, and and yes, I'm sorry to bother you, but would you mind? I've got a bit of a problem. It just does this thing to them, and it puts them a little bit on the defensive, because of course then they need to answer in English, which is not their first language. So it's kind of manipulation, but it's all with a good intention. I'm not trying to get, I'm not trying to scam them or anything.
Well, I think there's an example here in the US that I use and describe it to people. There's a brand of insurance in this country called Geico, and they use a gecko with, they talk like this, mate, you'll say 15 minutes for car insurance, and people that, when I open my mouth, some people say, wow, you sound just like that guy. And it is, again, I use it as a bit sometimes as an advantage. It's been shown that in some research that the English accent somehow denotes authority and gravitas, right? But then to use it with a Cockney accent, trying to say, if you said that to an actual Englishman, they would go, oh, I don't know about gravitas.
Yeah, right.
The accent, right? That it is a contextual thing. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you that the German accent is the one that works least in any context. Just to make that clear, right?
Yes, but soon he will be as irrelevant as his tweets.
We have ways to make you shut up.
Oh, yeah. Soon he will be as irrelevant as his tweets. Yeah. I loved it. Good old Arnie, eh?
Yeah. But In Germany's defense, Arnie is Austrian, and yet I
know, yeah, absolutely,
sympathize with many of his recent statements. Politics aside. So now you're this Englishman with a strong Italian background living in Norway. My question could be, how do you reconcile these three main cultural tendencies? And then I edit myself and say, well, do you reconcile it at all? How do you blend it, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you use the word reconcile, I use the expression, I pick the best one for the situation.
Right.
I think it's an advantage, right? I pick whichever, you know, I was talking about speaking English to flight attendants, but when I do my talks here in Norway, you know, they're all in Norwegian. And I made it a really important goal of mine when I moved to Norway to speak Norwegian. And I do my talks in Norwegian. I have my customer meetings all in Norwegian. There, I put them up and me down, if that makes sense. Yeah, I want to put them at their ease, and I am at their service. So, you know, I generally do that very consciously. And then the Italian part, yeah, I mean, you know, people, it is stereotyping, but people have got certain expectations when you're Italian. And I must admit, our neighbors have had some very nice late summer evening meals and outside dinners at our house, where we brought out the Italian wine and some of the other delicacies from the Napoli area. And, you know, and suddenly I'll become very Italian. And it's the, you know, it's the loudness, it's the sort of extrovert Pellegrino comes out. And
the gregarian host.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, no offense, but if you had to pick an Englishman, an Italian, or a Norwegian to run a party, you know which one you're going to go for, right? Yeah.
Well, I know. Yeah. Now, you said when you speak to people, when you go to your clients, many of our viewers may not be familiar with the work that you do. In layman's terms, how do you solve other people's problems? What's your business?
My business, I'll answer that in two parts. I'm actually a teacher, so I started teaching over 30 years ago. And I soon discovered that a good way to get people to learn was to actually use humor and images and stories. It was a great way to get people to learn. Long story short, 30 years later, I am now what's called a keynote speaker, but I use a style called edutainment or infotainment, where I kind of convert scientific research into interesting images, stories, and humor to get people to remember, learn, and change their behavior. And culture is one of the many subjects I talk about, the intercultural communication, but I basically talk about the interhuman aspects of today's world. And of course, the pandemic, well, on the one hand, it basically wiped all my work out initially in March for the whole of the year, did give me a lot of material on exactly that. And now we're back to some kind of normality, where I'm doing as much work, if not more, than before, but it's all digital. But I've got lots of material on the interhuman aspects and a kind of interface between humans and technology as well. And I think, you know, we've learned a lot about ourselves in the last year, haven't we? If nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit. I don't know. You, Brett, did you learn anything about yourself?
No, I think I have. Yes, I definitely have. I learned it very early, you know, and I wanted to observe it, you know, as somebody who does culture. I think we're predetermined to try and understand our responses to things. Not that it's a better skill; it's just a different skill, and so I tend to try and pass that on. And I loved one of your talks anyway, where you mentioned the power of this suggestion, right, with descriptions of certain cultures, right? And this is an example of you. And again, you somebody who loves humor in these things and the aspect. If you put up you put up on the screen a paragraph with these descriptions, right? So what you were doing here is setting up the description, right, of a Norwegian person, correct? Yes.
A stereotypical Norwegian, right?
Right. Yeah, so we kind of see this description here, and then you actually did the great job of highlighting some of the words that you know, in your talk, you're suggesting what are the words that you see here that trigger, oh yeah, this is a Norwegian person. And then, of course, it actually describes this guy.
Is he not Norwegian? I didn't know. Okay.
I thought he was.
Well, actually, some Norwegians in the audience have actually said to me, "Oh, it's my uncle." So, so they kind of hit back at you as well. They get it. They get the joke. They get the pun, and then they give you one back and say, "Oh, it's my uncle."
So how does this work when you do this talk? Do you use that example in Norwegian, right? And this is my question about the difference in using language and or maybe the limit of using language when you're speaking in English to a foreign audience, where you're using English words and trying to ask them to think about this. I was just interested in that when you use that example.
Yeah. Well, I have an advantage there because, of course, the Scandos are pretty good at English. So they have English TV everywhere. They don't subtitle anything. So they've got it all around them. So even if they don't speak English fluently, they understand it fairly fluently, at least below the age of 40, 50 even. So, but I do simultaneous translations on stage. If there's a tricky word there, I'll just say it in Norwegian, but they get it, right? If I were to do that in other countries where perhaps English was not as strong as a second or foreign language, good question. I don't know whether all of that would work as powerfully. The reason it does work, of course, with Norwegians is because they actually recognize themselves in those words because they've been told the same story, right? Stereotypes aren't just look from the outside looking in. They're also inside looking out. We often believe our own stereotypes. So it does work really well. And the point of that exercise is that while stereotypes are bad, then there is some truth in them as well. They don't come from thin air, right? They come from somewhere. And then obviously I follow that up by doing a session on, okay, while the stereotype has some truth in it, it's obviously dangerous to put people in the same box, to pigeonhole them and prejudge and pre-expect what they're going to say and do. So it's a powerful little sequence I have, and it catches audiences out every time. You know, it's cool.
Now, your audience is not in the same room with you in today's day and age, right? So you went through this hard stop, like many of us in I wouldn't say this industry, but in this work world where we deliver our knowledge, our expertise, our service, our facilitation to our clients. The three of us, I think, have that shared experience. We go to where the client is, and there's either one person or 100 person or 1,000 persons, and we do what we do best. And for many of us, this pandemic, this crisis has put a screeching halt to that. And you found a way for yourself to redefine how you approach your client. Would you care to explain how are you doing this? And maybe there are some lessons to learn for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, after the initial shock, the first 2-3 months, we had the summer. The summer was okay. And, we're fortunate enough to have a Norwegian state that's quite supportive financially. But I kind of gave myself a deadline. 1st of September, nothing had changed. So I just set about turning digital. I just said, well, I've got to do it. And it was really difficult at the beginning. Really difficult. This getting through the camera, I'm pretty comfortable now on stage, working audiences, seeing their reactions, feeding on micro expressions, getting them to play off each other. And suddenly that's all gone, right? And you're really you're just talking to a camera lens. You might have a few faces and teams next to you on a screen, but basically it's extremely cold. But what I did, which I didn't do as much before to help me, and is relevant actually for working cross-culturally, I asked very open, direct questions immediately after I'd finished. Did they like it? If they did, why? If they didn't, why not? So I got really open feedback from customers immediately after. I would literally call them after I'd closed the camera lens. I'd call them and say, what did you think? Was it good? Why was it good? What worked? What didn't? And it was almost, I felt almost narcissistic, neurotic, narcissistic. Tell me, me. But it was literally so I knew what was working and what wasn't. And eventually, I kind of figured out that this doesn't actually work that well for talks like this. So when I do my talks, I'm not here. I've got a little room next door where I've set up a studio with lighting, the mics, the screen, the mixing desk. It looks like YouTube, basically, because it really does make a difference. You know, your content could be really good, but it might not be getting across because it doesn't actually look like you're on stage, if that makes sense. So I created a little stage for myself and thought, how can I recreate my stage presence in a little room with a camera? And then I watched a lot of YouTubers. I did hours and hours of YouTubing to see what YouTubers do to make themselves look cool. And they all say the same thing: lighting. So now my lighting's terrible, right? I'm in my room, but over there the lighting makes me look young and sort of Italian and that took a long time to get right. Actually, I had to learn lighting, 3-point lighting. What's 3-point lighting? I had to learn all that. So I'm just sitting doing tutorials on YouTube.
Well, you and I share the same challenge of reflective.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can do my talks now without makeup now. I've managed to get the shine on the back of my head so it looks like a halo rather than a light bulb. So
nice.
But the reason I tell you that,
currently do not have. That's good. All right.
But the reason I tell you that for intercultural communication, it's so important to understand how you're being perceived by the other party.
Right.
You may not do it in such an open, blatant way, but it's so important to get to understand what are they seeing, what part of your behavior or performance or communication is working and what isn't. And if it's not working, what are you going to do about it to make it work? And that's a really important bridge builder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'm hearing from your journey is that you were not afraid to be told about what didn't work. So you, even though you tongue-in-cheek, I suspect it was tongue-in-cheek, called it narcissism. However, it takes a little bit of humility and guts to receive feedback that may not feed your ego, right? Is that part of your experience, life experience of being in Norway, where the ego is not as important as it may be in Anglo culture?
No, it is as important, but I found out the hard way that some of my communication styles that I brought with me simply didn't work in Norway. And I found the hard way, you know, by just seeing that people were offended, or, for example, the classic British banter. You know, we can hack away at each other and kind of, it's almost like sword fighting, isn't it, with words?
Right.
That didn't go down well at all. At least not with people you don't know well. You know, it sounds obvious now, but at the time I had no idea. Or, for example, the classic Italian loud voice, arms everywhere type of thing. I was standing on stage doing this, and Norwegians are just following your hands. Is he going to hit me or what? What's the deal here? You know. So I find out all these things by making these terrible mistakes. And wouldn't it be great if you could just ask people and they were generous enough to tell you what they perceived? You know, you save yourself so much time.
You were a guest on my podcast a couple of moons ago, and I don't know if you were the one who said it first. I certainly heard you say it the way I heard it the first time from you. It may be a borrowed quote. It doesn't really matter, but it really stuck with me what you said back then in that podcast about your philosophy of asking questions, that you think, and I'm paraphrasing, that no question is generally off limits or taboo if the question comes from a place of genuine curiosity and without judgment. So that is a mantra that I've been passing on to others. So thank you for that. I'm not sure if it's your original thought or if you were...
I think it is actually, yeah. It is, and thank you for remembering. That's a great compliment as well. But it is an original thought. I've kind of always been a curious person, but genuine curiosity. If there's a hint of opinion in there, it's not curiosity, right?
Right.
So, but generally just finding out, and I think I may even have told you, one of the most challenging, at the same time rewarding conversations I had was when I was sitting next to this guy at dinner in Oman, and he had 2 wives, right? And I wanted to know what life was like with 2 wives, just from a, you know, I need to know that, you know, I've got, this is a guy who's living the life. I'm an interculturalist.
Right.
I could go to YouTube and find it out, but this is much better. You know, it was quite difficult to maintain that kind of genuine curiosity without showing any hint of opinion or, for want of a better word, Western condescension at this man who has 2 wives, right? And it was a great conversation, a challenging one, but super rewarding. We had a great evening, actually.
What's the main thing you learned from that conversation?
Yeah, I asked him, so what's it like having 2 wives? And he looked at me and he just said, expensive, he said. Because he has to basically, you know, he's got 2 wives, 2 families, 9 children. 9 kids. And I said, oh, is that 5 with one and 4 with the other? And then he says, no, it's 9 with one. And unfortunately, he couldn't have children with the other wife. So he had a double life as well. And then he started telling me about how difficult that was, and, you know, how psychologically challenging that was to have 2 completely different family environments, right? And suddenly I'm learning all this stuff about this guy who I could have dismissed as having 2 wives, right? It was a great conversation, and a story I tell lots of people because it made such an impression on me, and kind of it wiped away that kind of prejudice and perceptions of others when you're not curious.
And I had a similar experience with a bank manager who was she was lovely. Muslim Indian lady, and of course we connected over cricket and things like that. But then the business side of it came down, and she said, you know, I'd thank you for your business. I'd like to take you to lunch. But by the way, do you mind if I invite my husband and my mother? I said, well, okay, absolutely. I think it obviously, you know, I thought I understood certainly that it was appropriate that she do that, but it gave me then a great chance to ask the question about, because I knew that her marriage was obviously in that context arranged, and I got the chance to ask her mother, which I was surprised. We didn't talk about business at all at the lunch. It was just me really curious about and through the lens of saying, I want to understand, because I want to be able to answer the question for other people who might ask me, do I have any idea? Because they might not be as comfortable as me asking those questions. So as an interculturalist, so I said, it's just this constant curiosity. Doesn't always kind of come off well, but I mean, most of the time you get really, really great results and reward out of it. Yeah.
Most of the time people are only too happy to let you know and inform you and sort of, you know, speak about themselves, if nothing else, right?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you suspend the judgment, though? That I think is the key, or one of the key skills in all of this. Is when we headlined our episode, how do you navigate through this challenging time with identity, or with the ability to, or with the knowledge and experience to navigate between different behavioral standards? How do we practice? How does anyone without our personal backgrounds, how do people learn and practice to suspend the judgment? Because the opinion is easy to bring out, right?
Absolutely,
pushing the pause button on that and allowing for information flow without filter. How do we practice this in your guys' experience?
Well, there are 2 things, I think. First of all, if you're giving people opinions, it's the same as shining a really strong flashlight in their eyes. And what will people do if they shine a flashlight in their eyes? They'll close their eyes. That's it. Conversation over, right? And the other thing is, for me, it's all in the word respect. Everyone knows what respect means, but not everybody knows what the etymology of the word is, what the word actually means if you trace it back, because that tells you, and that's read and respect. Well, it's to look again.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Look again, right? So respect is about looking again at a person from a different perspective. Now, here comes the really important part. Today, when I say I respect you, it almost means basically it means I agree with you. And respect does not mean agree. I can look at you from another perspective to learn more about you, but I don't need to agree with you. And that's how you suspend your judgment. Respecting someone is looking at them from different angles, different perspectives to gain a better understanding, but you don't agree with them. You don't have to. You might do, but you don't have to. And I think people are afraid to go there because it feels like you're agreeing with a person when you're showing interest in them, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly you think, oh, I'm agreeing with you and I don't agree with you. And then you stop respecting, you stop looking again. And that's the thing, that's the barrier basically.
I'm reminded of a quote by Carl Wake or Wyke. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He's a psychological theorist, I think University of Michigan. And I'm probably butchering the quote, but he says, argue like you think you're right, listen like you think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And it's that it doesn't mean that I need to listen to agree with somebody else. It means I need to listen to relate to the other person's perspective and maybe look at it from different angles. I don't have to agree with those people that have a different worldview, but I would be missing out if I cast judgment upon the first bit of information that I received from them.
Absolutely, that's it. And I'm not going to turn this into a political talk now, but just to say that is the essence of the US split. People have stopped listening to each other.
Well, not just the US. Many other countries have gone through similar challenges, right?
Yeah, both sides are equally guilty now. They just throw opinions at each other, right?
We have comments coming in from Cristina Arcaini. I still don't know if I pronounce your name correctly, but Pellegrino, you probably know how to pronounce her name. Cristina Arcaini? Arcaini?
Arcaini? How is it spelled? What's it spelled?
Arcaini.
Arcaini, it sounds like, yeah.
So Cristina from Italy said genuine curiosity and humility is important in her opinion. And then a fellow Englishman, Anthony Fitzgerald, says this is a tremendously interesting conversation, very enjoyable. Thanks for watching, Anthony. Excellent. So we got viewers from 2 of the cultures that you represent. Excellent. Cool. Where are the Norwegians watching? We need Norwegian comments here.
They're out skiing. They're out skiing because all the snow fell the other day, fresh snow, and they stick their lights on their heads and they go skiing in the forest. It's really cool, actually.
Nice.
That's why they all, yeah. They're out, man. They're all skiing.
Is it cross
country, all downhill, mostly cross country. And I live in a really, there's a lot of cross country skiing around where I live here. So they'll be out there doing all that. All the snow fell in Norway last week, so they're making the most of it. And good on you.
Dangerously competitive when it comes to cross-country skiing. Germans know it, and many other skiing nationalities know it. Man, they're good at this.
They drive like Norwegians, but they ski like Germans on the autobahn, yeah, as if they were cars.
This is lovely. This is lovely. Oh, and Christina says we pronounced it well, so I'm relieved. Very good, very good. Buonasera, Christina. Well, Pellegrino, how do people find you? How do people engage with you in this digital world?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say I have a very static, boring website, but if they Google Pellegrino Norway, I think there's only one Pellegrino in the whole of Norway, so it's easy to find me there.
Oh, so you're the distributor of the eponymous water, no?
Yeah, nothing to do with the water, unfortunately. Although the water tastes fantastic. San Pellegrino, beautiful. They can find me. I post the occasional LinkedIn. I'm about to start my own YouTube channel, actually. Yes, I am indeed. I get inspired by people like yourselves. I think it's amazing you come on every day and do this. It's great. I'm really impressed. Episode 133, I was like, wow. And the podcast is really going to be about human beings. I've got this talk out there at the moment, which I developed during Corona, and it's called We Are Humans, Not Zoomans, right? Mm-hmm. The importance of human relationships in a world of change. Because I could really see our humanity being challenged in many ways. We're not fed up anymore. It's not fed up of Corona. we humans, I believe, are basically sick, literally, physically, mentally ill of our isolation, right? It's shown us, if nothing else, that humans are an interactive species. And I don't mean only digital. That will always be part of the world, but we need proper interaction. And I don't know if you can see, but the mess behind me here, I'm an avid reader. So I've got my books here, and I start every day with an hour of reading. Just an hour of reading. I sit in my chair, I've got a lovely chair here, I put the candle on, and I start the day with an hour of reading. And it's primarily non-fiction, right? So it's all stuff that I can use. I basically steal other people's ideas and turn them into mine. Yes.
Right.
I thought I'd start a YouTube channel where I basically pull out a book from the shelf and use it as a starting point for some relevant topic. And I'll be doing it with a partner of mine here, who I do a lot of work with. So soon, hopefully, I'll be out there doing this type of thing, the same as you guys, and doing as good a job as you are too.
And I'm very, very convinced that this will be very enjoyable to watch. So stay tuned, people. Pellegrino will hit you with books every day. And I think, I'm not sure who said this first, but by reading and borrowing other people's ideas, we're doing what humanity has been doing for millennia, right? Some argue that at least in the Western world, nobody had an original thought since Aristotle and Plato, and we're all just plagiarists in some shape or form. However, by taking other people's grand ideas and reusing it through our experience, we create something unique, right? So it's not, I don't think it's copy and paste plagiarism. It's standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what else it is. It's storytelling. It's sitting around a campfire, a digital campfire, telling people stories. I read a really interesting thing today. That's it. And off you go. And just like people did around campfires, you start to embellish the story because you don't want a boring story. And that's when it becomes interesting. And then you create a discussion. Right. So, yeah, you're right. We have been doing this for many, many millennia. And I hope to continue it on a digital platform. But it's a digital campfire. Maybe that's the name of the YouTube channel.
Campfire. There, you got it. We just birthed the name.
Great.
We should include this as a mandatory question for every future guest. What's the last book you read? So Pellegrino, what's the hour of reading you did this morning? What was it? Which book?
Oh, I've got it on my right. Should I go and get it? It's called I don't know if I'm into it. It's Robin Sharman. He wrote the Monk and the Ferrari book, but he's got a book called The 5 a.m. Club. The 5 a.m. Club. There we go. It's about getting up at 5 a.m. and doing things. I think. I'm not sure that's for me. I'm being honest with you, but I'll tell you, if you want a really great book, this is a great book. This is the last book I read before then. Vicky Murphy. Vivek. Be the what's it called? I can't remember the title. The lead doctor surgeon in the USA, and he writes about the most serious illness in the USA is not obesity, it's loneliness. This is a book about loneliness, the healing power of human connection in a sometimes lonely world. Brilliant book. Right. Brilliant book. Amplified by our digital existence. Absolutely. Super relevant. Really cool book. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. I shall delve into that next. Pellegrino, grazie mille. Thank you very much. Altrettanto. Same to you. Really cool. Thank you for inviting me in. It was really interesting. God, that went fast. That's how we do it. Excellent. You have a wonderful winter. Stay safe. Go skiing or whatever it is you do. Be a gregarious Italian host for your Norwegian neighbors. I will. And be a human, not a zoom-in. I love that. 2 chaps, many cultures today. 3 chaps and 5 cultures represented. Maybe even 6. Who knows? Many. Hence the title of the program. We'll see you again tomorrow with episode 134. Stay tuned. Bye-bye. Take care.